let's think about radiation and where sources of radiation in the world are. So now I want you to quickly think about this question. Again, you're going to be tempted to skip ahead in the movie or just jump ahead to the answer or whatever, but just take a second to think about it. Right now, you are being exposed to nuclear radiation from somewhere in the world. And my question is, do you know where the biggest source of radiation that affects you right now is? Is it radiation coming from nuclear power plants? Is it small amounts of uranium that's in the ground? Is it radiation from space? Is it radiation from the person who's sitting next to you? Or is it radiation from radon gas? So think about it. Try to figure out if these are places that any radiation is coming from, lots of radiation is coming from, and have a moment to ponder. Having paused now, we can talk about what these different sources are. The number one source, the biggest source of radiation in your life, is going to be from radon gas. Now, radon gas is formed from the decay of uranium underground, so in some ways we can blame the uranium, but the source of the radiation that you get is from the decay of radon, which is generated from uranium decay. So let's look at a table of different sources of radiation. So this is typical radiation exposures for somebody living in the U.S., and this is the source and the amount in terms of millirem. And remember, a rem is less than a sievert or an SV. So this is how many millirems there is, which is an amount absorbed per kilogram. And this is the amount you typically get in a year. And you can quickly look at all the sources and you see radon gas is 200 millirems a year. It's by far the largest. After that, there's cosmic radiation. That's coming in from outer space, coming down on you through the atmosphere every day. There is some coming up from the Earth, mostly from uranium, but from other sources as well. Then there's from building materials. That, again, is things that were dug up from the Earth and are now found in concrete. There's human tissues. So, there's more radiation in human tissues, so the people sitting around you, than there is actually coming out of the Earth or from cosmic radiation. And then there's the inhalation of air, and that involves all kinds of radioactive sources. That's random fallout from various things like coal plants and nuclear power plants and so on and so forth. So natural sources accounts for almost 300 millirems a year. Then in addition, you're going to get other exposure from other things. In particular, if you have x-rays taken, that'll be about 50 millirems per year on average for most people. If you have some kind of radiotherapy or internal diagnosis therapy, that might be more. Nuclear power is to blame for very little of it. It's about 0.2. Watching TV and industrial waste, the TV tubes is not so much anymore because we have almost all LCD displays. Radioactive fallout, again, very small. Human activities, therefore, is a small amount of the radiation. Now, that's barring, of course, being exposed to a nuclear bomb or something like that, and or being at a nuclear power plant in which there was some disaster and release of radiation. This is a typical source. So let's think about this in a different way. We can look at the percent of radiation that you get normally, and this just has the same graph slightly differently and looks at it in terms of where is the radiation coming from as a fraction of the total. And you can see natural sources by far outweigh human sources, and that radon is absolutely an enormous factor compared to everything else. The other thing, you can see nuclear fuel, radioactive fallout, occupational hazard. These are all very, very small sources. Now, which of the following will give you the largest radiation exposure? And this has to do with choices that you make in your life, because the amount of radiation you get depends on how you live your life. So think about this for a second. What do you think will give you the most extra radiation? Flying in an airplane? Living within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant? Eating a banana? Smoking a pack of cigarettes, or having a dental x-ray? So again, you can pause it, think about it for a little while. Probably you're just skipping the movie ahead right now, wondering why I'm droning on still. If we look at these answers, we can see that the source of radiation depends on where you live. One thing that saves us from a lot of radiation is the Earth's atmosphere. And the higher up you live in elevation, the more radiation exposure you have. So this table shows that every 1,000 meters you're up, you're going to have to add a certain amount of, these are now micro SVs. And so, up 1,000 meters, maybe 20 more micro SVs, but if you're up 30, 3,000 meters, you're going to have to add 20, and then another 50, and then another 90. Depending upon what kind of house you live in, if it's brick or stone, it's going to be more radioactive than wood. Rocks, soil, food, water, these things will have something. If you get a dental x-ray, that'll be 100 microsieverts, chest x-ray, 100 microsieverts. If you have a serious GI tract x-ray, that might be as much as 5,000 microsieverts. One thing that people don't think about is airline travel. Airline travel, you're up in the air for a long period of time, so a 5-hour flight at 30,000 feet, that's going to add another 30 microsieverts every time you fly. So if you're flying a lot, like you're an airline pilot, this might provide some long-term health risk. Living within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, almost no additional radiation exposure. Living with 50 miles of a coal-fired power plant is actually going to add almost 3 times more. And that's, again, because of the small amounts of material that's released in the emission in coal. Using a computer terminal or watching TV, those are actually not true anymore because those are all from cathode ray tubes, the big giant old-fashioned TV sets. Now with a LCD or a LED or a plasma TV, there's almost no emission. And the number one thing you could do is smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. That'll be 10,000 microsieverts. So if you think about that, smoking up 1 pack a day, if you divide that by 365, a single pack of cigarettes is going to cost you about 30 microsieverts. It's very similar to getting a chest x-ray. And of course, every time you do it, every single day, it's going to add up and add up. And the reason is you're taking potentially radioactive things that are in a tobacco plant and you are breathing them into your lungs. And therefore, you've removed any defense that you have against alpha particles by keeping them outside your body. So it's useful to note the total average dose is about 365 microsieverts. That's 3.6 millisieverts. So that's not very much radiation. Remember, 1 sievert was going to be very bad. We're not even getting much over about 3 millisieverts. Okay, but long-term, over and over and over again, many of these things can build up. One thing to keep in mind, there is always a lot of talk about how much radiation do you get from things like eating bananas. Bananas have lots of potassium in them. Potassium has natural radioactive isotopes. But in fact, these effects are very, very, very small because your body always has potassium in it. So your body always has a certain amount of radioactive potassium. And what you bring in and ingest and what you put out is essentially always the same, and so you maintain a pretty much constant natural abundance of radioactive potassium in your body, regardless of what you eat, because you're always going to be eating potassium or you're going to die from lack of potassium. So what's going to have the biggest impact of all of these things? Well, flying in an airplane, smoking a pack of cigarettes, having a dental x-ray, those are all about similar exposure. It's somewhere between 30 and 100 microsieverts for each of those. So the biggest effect will be depending on how much you do them. Flying in an airplane all day long, every day, you get more exposure to radiation than you would otherwise. Choosing to smoke a pack of cigarettes every day, you get more radiation than you otherwise would. And having your teeth x-rayed every single day is not going to be good for your radiation dosage.